Good morning, AKF, and Merry Christmas, everyone. Today is December 24th, 2023. Today is better known as Christmas Eve. Christmas, the holiday named after Jesus, and the holiday celebrating his birth, is such an important holiday that the day immediately before it even has an official name, Christmas Eve. I'm sure you have some very memorable moments you've experienced on all the Christmas holidays you've enjoyed in your life thus far. But I have a question for you. Do you have any memorable moments from Christmas Eve? Since today is Christmas Eve, I thought it apropos to share something that happened on this very day in history. I wasn't alive then, but many of you were, and you may even remember this event. We are going to go back to Christmas Eve in the year 1968. This was 55 years ago today. Something incredible happened on this day. For those of you who were around back then, do you remember it? Do you remember Christmas Eve, 1968? What transpired back in 1968 is my irrefutable proof number 2 that we live on a globe. And it was the Apollo 8 mission. Apollo 8 is rarely, if ever, discussed in the shape of the Earth debate. It's almost always Apollo 11 that is discussed, which was the mission where man first landed on the moon. Here's an experiment. Do you know the names of any astronauts? Do you? Neil Armstrong? He was Apollo 11. Buzz Aldrin? Apollo 11. Anyone else? Michael Collins? You guessed it. Apollo 11. It was actually Apollo 8 that forever changed history. And unfortunately, it's been largely overshadowed by Apollo 11. On this Christmas Eve, I'd like to tell the incredible story of Apollo 8. For those who remember that historic Christmas Eve, this will be a trip down memory lane. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Apollo 8, you are about to hear the story of one of the most significant events in the history of mankind. To begin, you will need some understanding of the backstory, specifically the space race. The space race began in the 1950s and was between the United States and Russia, technically the Soviet Union at the time. Here's a picture of the cover of Time magazine from December 6th, 1968. The space race between the United States and Russia involved not only space flight, but ambitions to make it all the way to the moon. Russia took the lead in the space race by putting the first satellite into low Earth orbit. This happened back in October of 1957. As we learned in part 1, low Earth orbit is defined as up to 1,200 miles above the Earth's surface. This satellite was called Sputnik 1, and it reached a max distance away from the surface of the Earth of 583 miles. Now, I have a question for flat earthers. Did Russia know that the Earth was flat and that space did not exist, and therefore fake this satellite in space? Was Russia trying to hide the true shape of the Earth back in 1957? I know NASA is enemy number one, but when Russia launched Sputnik into space, NASA didn't even exist yet. So exactly what's going on here? And if America, since NASA didn't exist, if America at that time knew the Earth was flat and knew that space did not exist, which I'm not sure how they could have even known that, why did America not use this opportunity to expose Russia and embarrass them in front of the whole world? These are the easy questions, by the way, but here's the hard one. Once Sputnik was in orbit, amateur radio operators all over the planet, they were able to detect the radio signal from Sputnik when it passed over their country in space. So Russia was claiming to have the first satellite in space, and they were claiming to receive communication from it throughout the entire USSR, which was a very large geographical area covering 11 time zones. Now, America was stunned by this claim, but also naturally skeptical at the same time. And then news broke that a BBC monitoring station in England near London picked up the signal from Sputnik. And this prompted the United States to put a call to amateur radio operators across America to see if they could pick up the signal too. And they did. A man named Roy Welch took his 3-year-old daughter out into the yard at their home in Dallas, Texas. And he would put the radio speaker in a window, and they would wait outside until they saw a bright, pulsating star passing overhead, and then the radio speaker would play the signal. Here is a newspaper clipping from the Dallas News of Roy Welch playing a recording of the signal at the Texas State Fair. And here is an actual audio recording of the Sputnik signal. So here is the hard question for flat earthers. If Sputnik was not a real satellite in space, then what were all these amateur radio operators across multiple countries recording on their ham radios? And what was the fast-moving star which passed overhead in the night sky over and over again? And what was the signal being picked up by the radios only when the fast-moving star passed by? After the success of Sputnik, President Eisenhower responded by suggesting to the U.S. Congress that a new agency be established for the country's space endeavors. And the National Aeronautics and Space Act was signed into law in July of 1958, which is the genesis, the beginning of NASA. After sending the first satellite to space, Russia then sent the first animal to space, a dog named Laika. And for the animal lovers out there, I won't tell you what happened to her. And then in 1961, Russia sent the first man into space. Yuri Gagarin, in April of 61, was launched into a single orbit around the Earth. His max elevation was about 200 miles above the Earth. So the Russians are clearly winning the space race at this time. Again, flat earthers, if NASA knew all this time that the Earth was flat and that space was not real, why not expose the Russians for all these monumental fabrications of putting satellites and animals and now a man in space? And if you want to claim that they were somehow in cahoots with the Russians, then how does that work exactly? If both the United States and Russia are making all of this up, then is it simply that whoever tells the biggest lie first wins the space race? Fast forward to 1967, and both America and Russia experience fatalities in their space programs. The entire crew of Apollo 1 was killed in a ground test, and Russia lost one astronaut in a failed test flight. Some flat earthers will admit that they do not believe these men actually died. That is the logical conclusion of believing the spacecraft are fake and not really launching into space. Personally, I think this is horribly unfair to the families of those who lost loved ones in these tragic accidents. This brings us to 1968. In September of 68, Russia successfully sent the first spaceship to travel to the moon, circle it, and return back to Earth. And there were 2 tortoises aboard who survived. And on September 19th, the CIA intercepted Russian communication, which implied the Russians would soon circumnavigate the moon with men and possibly land on the moon. And so NASA decided to just go for it. Apollo 8 was only supposed to send men into low Earth orbit. But since Russia sent spacecraft all the way to the moon and back, and we're now talking about sending men to the moon, NASA decided to change Apollo 8 to a lunar mission to go all the way to the moon. And they only had mere months to pull this off, as they believed Russia would attempt this by the end of the year, by the end of 1968. So on December 21st, 1968, Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and Bill Anders boarded the Saturn V in an attempt to reach the moon. This was the official logo of Apollo 8. At this point in history, no man had ever been out of low Earth orbit. And as you will recall, low Earth orbit is not high enough, not far enough away from the Earth to see the entire globe. So these 3 men were in a position to be the first human beings in the history of mankind to see the entire Earth all at once from space. But would they live to tell about it? The wives and children of these 3 men were supportive, but very nervous about the mission, and rightly so. This had never been attempted before, sending men out of low Earth orbit. This was completely uncharted history. NASA gave the mission only a 50% chance of success, and this was given privately to one of the wives. She asked a NASA director point blank, "What chance does my husband have of returning safely?" And he looked her in the eyes and replied, 50-50. 2 weeks before the launch, there was a dinner, a big dinner, a gala at the White House. The Apollo 8 crew and their wives were all in attendance. And when dinner was over, these 3 women had to say goodbye to their husbands and fly home without them and would not see them again before the launch. And to understand how difficult this was emotionally, as they left the White House, they were given tapes with instructions to play them if their husbands did not make it back to Earth safely. Here is a video of the launch on December 21st. This took place at the Kennedy Space Center on Merritt Island, Florida.
10, 9. We have ignition sequence start. The engines are armed. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have commit. We have liftoff. Liftoff at 7:51 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
David Weiss, a very prominent flat earther who goes by the name Flat Earth Dave, says NASA rockets are actually inflatables. He says they are not real rockets and just essentially large balloons or blimps. Well, Dave, you should talk to the people who were present for the Apollo 8 launch back in 1968. Some of them could feel the heat from the engines firing. Even standing 3 miles away, their chests vibrated before the sound of the launching rocket reached their ears. They didn't just see this launch, they felt it. One of the fun things about NASA being a taxpayer-funded agency is that the pictures and videos they take are then in the public domain. I don't know exactly how public domain works, but we have access to all of the pictures and videos from these space flights, most of them without even needing a FOIA request. FOIA stands for Freedom of Information Act. I actually made a FOIA request of NASA while preparing this message, and a very nice gal named Carissa from NASA helped me out tremendously. And so we are going to look at just some of the hundreds of pictures and videos the Apollo 8 crew took on this mission. These photos and videos are irrefutable proof we live on a globe. What you are about to see changed mankind forever. The first video clip is known as a separation. In space travel, there are various stages, and when one of the spacecraft's rockets completes a stage, it is separated from the rest of the spacecraft. Here is one of the separations from the Apollo 8 mission. I want you to notice the debris falling to Earth after the separation. The video also pans from one edge of the globe to the other. And there is no ice wall, of course, because an ice wall around the entire Earth does not exist. And you cannot see all of the land masses on Earth because this is just one hemisphere. You can also see a large land mass cut off at the bottom of the Earth as the rest of it is behind the horizon. I just want to remind the flat earthers that this is a video taken from space in 1968. As Apollo 8 entered into their trans-lunar injection, they did something no man in history had ever done. They left low Earth orbit. No man had ever left low Earth orbit. They were now headed into deep space. And this would put them in a position to view Earth as no man had ever seen it before. Remember, from low Earth orbit, you cannot see the entire globe. But they traveled further than low Earth orbit and would now be able to see the entire planet. Now, of course, flat earthers call everyone a liar if they claim to have seen anything or done anything that contradict what a flat earther believes. So they would never accept testimony from these men that they were in space and saw the entire globe all at once. So they would probably ask these men to prove that they were in space and saw the entire globe all at once. And their story is that proof. This is their story. After leaving low Earth orbit and now headed for the moon, it would take them 3 days to get there. If you think about it, that's an eternity being holed up in the cramped command module in the darkness and void of space. On the 3-day journey to the moon through space, the crew took videos of each other inside the command module. The first one was broadcast back to Earth live. This is Bill Anders getting a toothbrush out to show the world what happens in zero gravity. You'll see the toothbrush floating, and then he spins it. And it gets hit back to him, and then he tries to grab it with his mouth out of midair, but is unsuccessful. This original video clip is uncut and a full minute long, which is crucial, which I will explain in a second. This next video was not broadcast live to Earth, and so the picture is much better. Just this one clip from inside the command module is 2 minutes and 20 seconds of uncut footage. As you watch this video, I want you to notice the floating camera here. Frank Borman spins it in midair as Bill Anders turns the camera to Jim level. And they are floating the entire time. And the objects around them are floating. Fast forward a little and we get to my favorite part. First, you will see a roll of tape float to Jim. And then I want you to follow the flashlights carefully. They are floating, and then I love how Jim Lovell puts a flashlight where he needs it and just lets go in order to use both of his hands. And then Bill Anders spins one of the flashlights in midair, and you can see the light from the flashlight moving in a circle and lighting up the inside of the command module in a circle around them. The original uncut clip is almost 2.5 minutes, which is very significant. Because flat earthers have to explain how all of this happened. Remember, they don't believe space exists, and so they don't believe these men are in space headed to the moon. So they have to explain the floating astronauts, the floating and spinning video camera, the floating and spinning flashlights. How did all this happen if they were not really in space headed to the moon? The flat earther will respond and claim that all these videos were recorded in a zero gravity plane. Now, before I deal with that answer, I just can't resist And I must point out the irony here. Flat earthers do not believe gravity exists. So it's funny to me when they talk about zero gravity planes. If you don't believe gravity exists, then everything is zero gravity. Every car is a zero gravity car. Every house is a zero gravity house. And every plane is a zero gravity plane. Anyway, a zero-G plane takes parabolic flight paths in order to simulate the weightlessness of space. And flat earthers will appeal to zero-G planes for any videos of astronauts floating in space like we just watched. There's just one problem, though. You only get 27 seconds of weightlessness at a time in a zero-G plane. 7 years ago, a band called OK Go filmed a music video inside a zero-gravity plane. It's one of the coolest music videos I've ever seen. And if you watch the music video carefully, the weightlessness effect stops every 27 seconds. And if you watch the behind the scenes making of video as to how they were able to create this music video, they explain that they had to choreograph the entire thing based on only having 27 seconds of the zero gravity effect at a time.
To make our zero gravity video for Upside Down and Inside Out, we flew in a plane that basically goes like this. Each of these humps is called a parabola, and on each parabola what you feel is 20 seconds of double gravity while the plane is throwing you into the air. Then you feel weightless for about 27 seconds while you go up over the top and kind of sail back towards the ground. Then at the bottom the plane catches you again and you feel 20 more seconds of double gravity.
And then here's what happens after you get your 27 seconds of zero gravity.
After the whole maneuver is done, you've lost a lot of altitude, so it takes about 4 or 5 minutes for the plane to gear back up to do it all over again.
So after you get your 27 seconds, it takes 4 to 5 minutes for the plane to get back in the air in order to do it again. Here's what the director had to say.
So the important thing to get from all of this is that in a plane like this, the maximum amount of weightlessness you can get at any one stretch is about 27 seconds. Because if you try to do more than that, you're going to hit the ground.
This is how zero-G planes work in real life. By the way, these guys threw up 58 times filming a 3-minute music video because of the constant starting and stopping up and down. And so the flat earthers appeal to zero-G planes for these long, uncut videos taken by the Apollo 8 crew. It just doesn't hold any water. There are minute-long and 2-minute-long and almost 3-minute-long videos of the crew in the command module experiencing complete weightlessness the entire time. On December 23rd, 1968, they entered into the moon's gravitational field, even though they were still tens of thousands of miles away from the moon. This was another first in human history, leaving the gravitational field of Earth and entering into the moon's sphere of gravity. The Apollo 8 team finally reached the moon on Christmas Eve, 55 years ago today. And their task was to enter into lunar orbit so they could take video of the moon's surface in order to prepare for a possible moon landing on a future mission. We had no idea at this point what the surface of the moon was like. And so this mission was required to see if it would even be possible to land on the moon's surface and to locate potential landing sites. Being in lunar orbit around the moon meant that the crew would end up on the far side of the moon. This meant that radio communication, radio transmission with mission control back on Earth would be lost. That's a scary proposition. Imagine flying on the backside of the moon with no communication possible with anyone on Earth, and then not knowing if the spacecraft would do what it was supposed to do and come back out on the other side. As they came back around, they continued to perform multiple orbits around the moon, taking high-resolution video of the surface of the moon. And then without any warning, this happened.
And then we righted ourselves, heads up, and twisted the spacecraft so it was going forward. And while Frank Borman was in the process of doing that, suddenly I saw out of the corner of my eye this color. It was shocking.
Oh my God, look at that picture over there. There's the Earth coming up. Wow, is that pretty. You got a color film, Jim? Hand me a roll of color quick.
Oh man, that's great. Where is it?
Quick.
So I managed to get Lovell to get me a color magazine, put the long lens on and started snapping away.
Got it? Yep. Just take several.
Take several of them. Here, give it to me.
Wait a minute, let me just get the right setting here. Now, just calm down, Lovell.
Oh, I got it right. Oh, that's a beautiful shot.
Okay.
Now there's the explosion.
I did. I took two of them.
You sure you got it now?
Yeah, it'll come up again.
This forever changed mankind. The pictures that Bill Anders took of the Earth rising over the horizon of the moon are some of the most important pictures ever taken by man. Here is the famous picture taken on Apollo 8, now known as Earthrise. And if you are familiar with this picture, you are going to complain to me that this image I am showing you does not look right. The color does not look right. The black is not black enough. The blue of the Earth is not blue enough. And you'll also point out that the orientation is wrong. Well, I am showing you the original image. And these are the original colors. And this is the original orientation as Bill Anders took it. This image you see here has been color corrected, and the orientation changed to look like what we think of when we think of a celestial body coming up over the horizon. Yes, the famous Earthrise photo was edited by NASA. And many flat earthers have tried to tell me that this famous picture was actually photoshopped. Back in 1968, before Photoshop existed. And keep in mind that NASA puts the original photo on their website right next to the edited one, so they are clearly not trying to hide anything. I guess everyone else is allowed to touch up their own pictures, their selfies, and not tell anyone, but NASA can't color correct while simultaneously putting the original raw photo right next to it on their website. You know, the world could learn a thing or two from NASA. Imagine if dating sites made you put up the original picture of yourself right next to the edited one. This picture changed history. Mankind had never seen Earth like this before. A blue marble floating in space. The famous blue marble picture, the one everyone's heard of, that one was taken in 1972 from Apollo 17. This picture, though, the Earthrise picture, is the OG blue marble, my term for it. The Apollo 8 mission produced the first image ever of the entire earth from space. And this happened on Christmas Eve. Shortly after, on the evening of Christmas Eve, the Apollo 8 crew was asked to broadcast live from the moon. They were instructed to address the world with something appropriate, but were given no further instructions as to what to say. Just say something appropriate. They were only prepared that a lot of people would be watching this live broadcast all over the world. Little did they know, it would be the most viewed television broadcast in history at that time. It is estimated that 1 billion people in 64 countries heard this broadcast. So what do you say when you are coming to essentially the whole world with a message on Christmas Eve from the moon? What do you say? As you sit in space, looking at the earth as no man has ever seen it before, what do you say to all of those people on the planet? And remember, Christmas was banned in the USSR at this time. So it's Christmas Eve. You have now taken the lead against Russia in the space race, and Christmas is an illegal holiday in that country. With the whole world tuned in the night before Christmas, this is what they decided to say to everyone on planet Earth.
We are now approaching lunar sunrise, and for all the people back on Earth, the crew of Apollo 8 has a message that we would like to send to you. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. And the evening and the morning were the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth.
As they were in space, broadcasting from the moon, and viewing God's created earth as a whole for the first time in human history, they knew the right thing to do was to read the creation story itself, to go back to the origin of our planet. Flat earthers tell us that NASA lies about the true shape of the earth in order to hide God. Newsflash, flat earthers, you cannot hide God. Romans 1:20 says, For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. No amount of money, no amount of power, nothing can hide God. His attributes are clearly seen by everyone. And this idea that NASA was trying to hide God with the first mission beyond low Earth orbit is simply ridiculous. Even they recognized the importance of bringing us back to the story of God's creation as they ventured deeper into his creation than ever before. And the Apollo 8 mission became known for the Earthrise picture and the Genesis reading. This stamp was released in 1969 to commemorate the Apollo 8 mission to the moon. There is an image of the Earthrise picture on the stamp, and it says, "In the beginning, God," to remember where this incredible world began. The Apollo 8 mission was not well received by two groups of people. Atheists were not happy that the Bible was read in the worldwide television broadcast from the moon. The founder of American Atheists, Madalyn Murray O'Hair, actually sued the U.S. government over that Genesis reading. And the other group of people who were not too happy with the Apollo 8 mission? The flat earthers. Here's an article printed in the St. Louis Dispatch back in 1968. It says, "Britain's Flat Earth Society acknowledged today, after viewing pictures of the Earth from Apollo 8, that it must take another look at its theories." And one more from the Green Bay Press Gazette, which says, "The American astronauts' trip to the moon aboard Apollo 8 has become a headache for the International Flat Earth Society. It believes the world is shaped like a dinner plate, but now some members aren't so sure. We've lost a lot of members because of this absurd Apollo trip," said the chief flat earth man, Samuel Shenton. "I should think we're down to fewer than 100 members now." The Apollo 8 crew took hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pictures and videos on this mission. And many of them were of our Earth, a blue marble in space. These pictures and videos from 1968, such as this one, testify to the true shape and beauty of our planet. As we depart today on Christmas Eve and prepare to celebrate the birth of Jesus tomorrow with family and friends, let's not forget how our universe began. In the beginning, God. And I leave you with this. Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we come to you today, and Christmas every year is a great opportunity to remember you, to remember what you've done for us, and to remember that you sent your Son to earth for us. And I just pray that the number one holiday of the year is an opportunity for people to remember the truth of the past and to give us an opportunity to witness to others through the holiday that has the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. And we pray this all in his name. Amen.